I just remember, I was still fascinated by that, I don't know if it's an apocryphal story of the mayor of Chicago standing on the steps of City Hall in the days of Alexander Graham Bell and pronouncing someday, I don't know if he had that accent, but never mind, he was sort of Americanish, someday, holding the telephone, every city in America will have one of these. How true. And now, of course, every person has at least, can't find mine now. Well, you know what I'm going to hold up. Everybody has at least one of these. You've got one, I'm sure. Let me yours. Oh, God, you've got two. Why am I not surprised? Greg Taylor at the front's got two. So everybody's got at least two of these now. And we're going to hear some stories. I don't know whether they're success stories or not. You can be the judge of that. But we're going to hear from three people who have got something valid, useful and important to say, because it's based on real, genuine experience, not of thinking about it, but of working to harness mobile learning. So, Keith, over to you.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Good. Maybe just better explain what the Scottish Social Services Council is. We are a workforce regulator for Scotland, for all social service workers, but we're also the lead agency for workforce development, so we've got two main functions. So clearly I sit in the kind of workforce development side of the business. So in terms of why we're kind of interested in mobile learning, number of factors. We've got a huge workforce in Scotland, one of the biggest workforces in Scotland, 198,000 staff spread across the country, including the Highlands and Islands. And that's growing. I think it's grown at the rate of something like 5% a year despite recession. Just to give you an idea of scale, I think the NHS in Scotland's around about 130,000 staff, so we're bigger than that. The vast majority of our employers are small to medium-sized enterprises. Actually, a great number of them are what you would call micro-employers, so kind of less than 10 employees, very, very small. So what does that mean? It means you've got no HR department, no training department, and IT support is the screwdriver in your back pocket. That's the kind of types of general employers we have. In Scotland, we also have a qualifications-based registration system, so staff have to gain qualifications before they can join the register and basically have a licence to practice. Alongside that, though, like everywhere else in the UK, we've got a financial crunch on. So we've got a decrease in financial resources, which means that we have less staff available to backfill posts when people come away for training. So we have less release staff, and we have a lot of difficulties actually getting people out of the workplace because of the logistics of that. We have to have legal minimums on the floor, as they would say in residential and daycare. So we have problems actually achieving that. So for that workforce, the traditional model is the classroom. If anybody who's at this conference has not seen this curve before, you've not been paying attention. The Ebbinghaus curve, everybody's seen it. And I trot it out regularly and tell folk it's real cutting-edge psychology, 1885. Still as true today as it was then. So the predominant model in social services in Scotland is people come out of the workplace, they go and learn, and they go back. So this is what we have. Lots of money spent on training, not a huge impact, because people forget what they've heard. This has been around for a while as well, not quite since 1885, but what it shows is, with some practice, so it's kind of spaced repetition, revision of what you've learned, your retention rates don't have to do this. If you're kind of willing to put in 5–10 minutes a day, you can stay up in the high 90s in terms of retention. If you think back to what I said was the predominant model for training, it's kind of hard to do that when you can't get back to the classroom and talk to the trainer and get the clarification of the bits you really didn't quite understand. So it's hard to implement that. So e-learning is one way to do that. So what we did was we set up a project really to have a look at three main things. We wanted to demonstrate that e-learning doesn't necessarily equal keyboard, mouse and screen. And if you talk to most trainers in Scotland and you say, want to have a look at a rollout of e-learning, that's what pops into the mind is, you need computers. Of that 198,000 staff, the vast majority are not in a desk-based environment. They're out in the community. So we want to show folk there are alternatives to using computers. We also wanted to examine if the theory holds about learning transfer. So is learning transfer more effective if you're learning in the workplace? I'm going to come back to that. And we wanted to model the creation of low-cost, targeted, tailored, quick-to-deploy materials. So we used PlayStation Portable, using a system called Second Sight that was originally developed for secondary school kids and primary school kids. First time we saw it was at the Scottish Learning Festival, where they had a copy of Hamlet's Twelfth Night with these markers in it. And when they pointed the PSP camera at the marker and say Act 1, Scene 3, the Royal Shakespeare Company would act out that scene on the screen. Or you would have somebody explaining to you in plain English what all the kind of Shakespeare gobbledygook actually meant. So that's the first time we saw it. And we thought, you could really apply that to real workforce development for adults. So there's two main ways to use it. You can enhance printed materials like I just described. So you can provide rich multimedia content to kind of stimulate learning or to be complementary to the text-based material you're trying to get across. Or you can use it in an augmented reality mode to overlay learning materials on the real physical world, or use the physical world as a trigger to access materials. So we worked closely with Glasgow City Council, and they took a course on violence, aggression and personal safety at work that every member of staff in the department has to do. It's one of these pot-boiler courses like health and safety and food hygiene, and it just rolls and rolls every year, constantly on the calendar. And we converted it from a classroom experience to a distance learning experience, and then augmented it using Second Sight. And our pilot project took two groups of staff, one who came in and accessed the course in the traditional manner. Let's sit in a circle, share our ignorance, and listen to the trainer. So the traditional classroom experience. The other group did the PSP route. Both groups were fairly typical of our sector. So they were 35 to 55, mostly women, high numbers of part-time, and in terms of baseline learning, they had either an SVQ, or as you would recognise in England, an NVQ 2 or above, or were working to that. So we had a whole range of people who had SVQs, who had degrees in social work, who had higher national certificates and diplomas, who accessed the same programme. So, what did we find? Well, first one, technology-enhanced learning approach was more effective than coming into the training centre. I'm going to say why as we go down the list, but that was both in terms of what was retained and the detail that was retained. The learners and their managers both reported that in terms of learning transfer, if you think back to what we were trying to look at, learning transfer was much easier using the PSP. We had learners quoting things like, it was very easy to sit and work through this material and pause and think about how would I apply that in this meeting room or this interview room. Because one of the exercises is prepare a room for an interview to remove all potential hazards to you as an interviewer, so things that could be used as weapons. And it could be simple as the cords on the blinds, a pen lying on a desk, all kinds of things. And they were able to sit in their own interview rooms, do that exercise, and then so you're applying the learning right away. The technology was well liked, and I was quite surprised, because when you look at the profile of our group, I thought, these aren't the kind of people who traditionally you would associate with using a PlayStation Portable. So there's going to be a bit of resistance to the technology. And in fact, we had one person who didn't like it, out of everybody, just one. And when we dug a bit deeper about why that was, it was a night shift worker who should have really benefited from the approach. But if you work night shift and you come in to the training centre for a course, you get that night shift off, you get time off in lieu at 1.5 times the hours because you've had to come in during the day, and you get the next night shift off so you can get back into your sleep pattern. So what they were really angry about was, you've taken my goodies away. And I'm in the huff. You know, that was basically what it was. So overwhelming support for using the technology. Very, very surprising. We found that the technology-enhanced approach really improved retention, and particularly in the detail. So there's some trigger videos where they see an approach to dealing with conflict, and one of them has a member of staff dealing with a group of young people. The same trigger videos are used in the classroom, and the classroom group could tell you there was a group, but they couldn't tell you how many were in it. PSP group, every single one of them could tell you exactly how many kids were in the group, how many were male, how many were female. And because what we did with them was we gave them the PSP and we said, you've got this for a full week. Now, to run through this material should take you, if you sit down and do it at one, it'll only take you about 3.5 hours. But you've got this for a week. It's up to you. You can hand it back as soon as you're done, or you can keep it for the week. Nobody handed it back. Not a single one. Because what they were beginning to do was, and we had this back through research questionnaires, they were saying, if I wasn't really clear about what was being said, I could just go back and do it again and again and again until I got it. Or I could go and, if I still didn't get it, I could go and talk to my manager, who was able to help me understand what it was I just wasn't quite getting. So without actually saying to them, you can do spaced repetition, they did it without any prompting. The use of mobile technology was seen to have a massive impact, positive impact, on dealing with the logistics of training. So they were able to work around shift patterns, they were able to work around variations in workload demand, they were able to take an hour here or there, they didn't have to leave the floor. So because what you get a lot of in service training and social services is, you turn up for a group and you try and work out who everybody is. People haven't showed because somebody's been off sick. They can't leave the unit because it would make it, they'd have to shut the unit basically because it would be illegal to open. Or you get the thing where Andy's sick today, so I'm Andy. Well, you're no Andy because you look like an Elaine to me, but you know. So you get a lot of that. People coming along to fill a space, and you're saying, so what are you going to learn? I don't know, I'm just here to fill Andy's shoes. You know, so you've got learners who aren't there ready and receptive for learning. The use of the mobile technology takes all of that away. But one of the best results I got back for the research questionnaires was, overwhelmingly for learners, was the bit about user control. They were in control of learning. So, very quickly, in terms of augmented reality, you can put markers on equipment in workplaces, associate learning materials to that, and you're actually using the equipment that you're going to be working with. So if you think back to the situated learning thing, what you're doing is taking a distance between knowledge acquisition and application and doing that. Right? So you're going to increase the likelihood of learning transfer. This year we're also working with an organisation where people who've got learning disabilities, and we're trying to establish them in their own homes, and they're using the PSP to teach life skills. So they can tag up somebody's environment And if the support worker can't be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the PSP can be. And the beauty is, it can be their support worker talking to them on the PSP. So it's a known face and a known voice. I'll try and click through this quick. Benefits in terms of cash. We spend about 198 million on in-service training and social services a year in Scotland. If 20% of that moves to mobile, that's a saving of £39.5 million. So, big financial incentive. In terms of learning, as I've said, what we've done, what it does is removes the gap between acquisition and implementation. So there are real learning benefits. Very quickly, that's it. If I've got any questions.